I'm Sunil Sharma, CEO of InferSystems, and the thing that I want to talk to you about today is about the design of this industry and where it's going. So it's sort of a view into a white paper that we've released just today, and it was a very, very sort of in-depth effort to try to figure out, and we went through the process of actually talking to a number of key executives in the market, from advertiser to publisher, to try to distill some of the issues and sort of where this industry is going, what it means for you guys, for us, for everybody in the market. And of course, there's sort of an agenda baked into this as well. So this is what we don't do. Optimization is sort of a ubiquitous term. Like if I set my watch right now, it's optimization. I'm optimizing something. So what does InferSystems do? Before I dive into the paper, I'll kind of tell you why I think we're important, and I think we provide sort of a layer that's been missing. One of the myths about this market has been that there's been this sophisticated math. It's a math-driven market. BS. It's not a math-driven market. It hasn't been a math-driven market. People tried to make it a math-driven market a while ago and started using math that was applied in other industries, which is very, very appropriate, regression-based approaches. However, they don't work in this market. So it's sort of a spreadsheet-driven, manual optimization-driven market. Now, over the last couple of years, the folks who are building these mathematical systems have begun to realize that you have to move away from regression into non-parametric statistics. So everybody's moving into that field. Why we're different is we've been doing the non-parametric stats for 10 years. We were funded by a National Research Council of Canada to try to figure out how to predict volcanoes and earthquakes. And like every other great scientific discovery, it's now being applied to ad tech. So that's what we do. So that being said, if I can get this thing to work. Technical difficulties. Okay. So I want to talk to you about the paper, and we'd love for you guys to download and give us feedback, because the more feedback you give me, the more return I can get from my shareholders. So of course that's the agenda baked in here. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So we're going to start by talking about what we call the RTB crystal cube. This is the industry design model that we're going to predict the future with and get to utopia. Then we're going to talk about IBM, a company that really did that in the real world, but give you a different perspective on IBM, not the false one that's sort of been put out there in terms of a story that we've all heard about the IBM turnaround. We'll talk about some of the implications for the folks in this market and some of the challenges to the innovation. Again, if I can get this thing to work. So here's the RTB crystal cube. So this was developed not by me, but a mentor of mine, the late, great Jeff Ellis, a former professor of strategy at Babson and some of the leading global business schools. And Jeff spent decades working with some of the biggest companies in the world across industries. And through his practice, he figured out that the best companies, what they do, and this is something we intuitively know, they really sort of chart a course for the future. They don't think about trench warfare with competitors and then get to the future. And what he found was they really uncover the vectors that an industry is traveling along. So it's not five forces or steeple or technology or these generic things. You have to dive into the grassroots and through practice figure out, okay, what is this thing really evolving along? And then that's the utopia that you try to get to. And so in our case, it's scale, efficiency, and advertising impact. We have a lot of scale. We have a lot of efficiency. We have scale and execution, maybe not as much scale and performance. Advertising impact is limited. You have to be able to put things like the creative type, the ad unit type, in addition to the audience data and thousands of other parameters into the mathematical system to actually figure out what the impact of advertising is. So that's kind of what we're trying to get to, the utopia. So the IBM story, very quickly, is the story is that IBM stopped becoming a technology, a hardware company, became a services company, a software company, when it realized that its hardware business was no longer profitable. That's complete nonsense. And by the way, I'm a former IBMer. I worked in IBM Market Intelligence, so this is sort of near and dear to my heart. IBM actually didn't stop becoming a hardware company. They doubled down on hardware. So when Lou Gerstner came in, they actually doubled down on mainframes and hardware and then built all these services around them. So their DNA became stronger, but the company started doing different things with its DNA. And the proof is in the pudding. 5 of the top 10 fastest supercomputers in the world today are IBM. And the fastest supercomputer in the world is IBM. So can you be the best hardware company in the world and not be a hardware company? Does anybody think that? So clearly IBM is a hardware company, doubled down on its DNA, and then it started doing strategic things around that to become a more effective company. So the key is you've got to double down on your DNA. So in ad tech, we believe there are 4 key areas of DNA that you can build a business around. Data, technology, mathematical systems, that's what we do, and people. And we think people are still the most important thing here. Now, you can build a business around any one of these, but in order for you to get to utopia, you have to connect all four. You have to do, as Vikram was saying, you have to specialize in a lot of different areas. You have to excel in every single one. Now, as we know intuitively and as our research has uncovered, there's not a single company in this space that does every single one of these well, not even Google. So then if you accept that premise, that means that if you want to get to utopia, if you want to get to that future, you have to collaborate or you have to step aside. And we want you to collaborate because then we get to sell mathematical systems. So let's start with data. The key to data is it has to be redefined. You know, we think of data as the audience segment. That's limited. Data is the number of ads on a page, the contextual category, above or below the fold. It's what time you serve the ad, whether it's creative A versus B. And what we're finding is that when we use just the publisher's data from the ad server without any audience data, you can actually optimize campaigns very effectively with that. The issue has been, the limitation has been that, as Jeremy alluded to earlier, you can make all the data available in a private exchange, but if the buying system's not able to evaluate all of it simultaneously to make a decision, you can't scale. So I think the key with data is it has to be redefined. The next piece is the technology. We think that the technology is a commodity, and commodity is not a bad thing. Oil is a commodity. So the middle space is technology, and it's going to continue to evolve as technology, and you're going to start to see it be more of a scale and efficiency and services type of positioning for the middle players. And we're already starting to see this, that advertisers and publishers are actually starting to bring the intelligence in-house now. So they're starting to gain back the control and collapse that supply chain. So no longer are the advertisers and publishers really reliant upon third parties to do intelligence, but they're just starting to make those inroads. And some are better than others. The math, it's all about using all the variables that you have. If there are 7,000 in a log file, you got to use them at the same time if you're going to optimize. If you're limited to the same 6 or 7 as everybody else, audience targeting, third-party data, site retargeting, here's the issue. Even if they all work, you're all going after the same pool of inventory in an auction, and it's just going to be more expensive than it needs to be, and you're never going to scale. So you have to find the next pocket. So you have to make all of your data work, not just third-party data. And as we know, data is mute and deaf, as our friend Galileo found out when he disproved heliocentrism. You have to do something with the data. It doesn't tell you anything. So, and then the last piece, of course, is this is self-evident, the people. The people are still the most important thing. I always get a kick, and as a former agency guy, I always get a kick out of the fact that there are those in this space that think that you can just push the people aside and the technology can do everything. Everything becomes commoditized if you do that. It's self-evident. But as is always the case, our greatest strength is our greatest weakness. And we think that what the market is really suffering from at this point is innovation fatigue. Aside from procurement challenges and those types of things, there's sort of a desensitization to innovation at this point. However, it seems to us very consistently that the companies that are really making the successful moves, they're not in any one part of the supply chain. The one consistent factor seems to be they have executives who have the vision, who are making the investments and taking the risks to get to the next level. So with that, within the paper, we actually chart where the companies are on the crystal cube, but we have not enough time to do that in this particular forum. But as the great former IBM commercial used to say, stop talking, start doing. And so we would love to, we have a few hours left in this forum, meet with you guys and start doing. So thank you very much.
So I have just a quick question for you. Innovation fatigue came up a few times. You mentioned it and it came up earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about how to overcome that?
I think the way you overcome innovation fatigue is you just got to be a riverboat gambler. I mean, you've got to have that in your DNA. You've got to take chances. And you've got to build a team, I think, that on an operational level just wants to solve problems and sort of prove themselves wrong, rather than saying, I've discovered like 10% of the solution, so I'm just going to push back on the new solutions now. I think we find a lot of that in the market.
Okay.